Hello, folks. Yes, today with a very special guest, Kassra Zargaran. Thank you for making the journey. And yes, it's a very special topic for me. I've been following what you've been doing, and I don't want to play it for the people here, but you've been here for a few days already. We've already gotten to know each other a bit, and this isn't coming out of nowhere. And the first question I'd like to ask you before we get into the details like age and so on, is the designation correct? Kassra, the murderer?
Legally, of course, I was convicted for the act, but if you read a bit into the legal aspects of the topic, that means legally. So in terms of the verdict, yes, of course, legally indeed.
So are you practically a murderer?
No, I'm not. I didn't kill anyone.
Okay.
So I am only, in quotation marks, we don't want to downplay it. I was convicted as an accomplice and co-perpetrator of a murder execution because I knowingly went along with a crime, according to the court's definition, knowing that someone from our group was supposed to kill someone else there. And thus, because you have the knowledge and went in there with the intention and with the knowledge, it is legally defined as joint. But I myself did not harm the man, I did not kill him.
But what does the verdict say?
The verdict says joint murder.
Joint murder.
But I myself have not killed anyone.
Legally, are you a murderer?
Convicted of joint murder, yes.
Legally, you're a murderer?
Correct, yes.
Okay, but you don't feel like a murderer because you didn't commit it yourself and also didn't know about the act or that it was supposed to result in a murder?
Yes, correct, yes. It's also in the verdict. I don't want to go into that now. Everyone can form their own opinion about it, but since we're already so deep into the topic, as far as this definition is concerned, of course the verdict plays a crucial role, and if you read the verdict, it also states what my involvement was and why it was defined that way and what my role was in the whole story. That means legally there's always a headline, it's clear, joint murder. That's the legal term. I was convicted for that, but I didn't kill anyone, and therefore I don't consider myself a murderer. It's on paper, but I didn't kill anyone. So, but like this,
I think most of the people who are new to my community will know it's about the betting shop murder. That's what it's called. I believe it's one of the most extreme cases in Berlin.
yes, definitely, also known as the expect murder.
Of course, it's not that easy to start an interview with such tough questions. You were the key witness in the trial. We'll get to that later. Did you become a key witness to save your own skin?
Yes, of course. We're already deep into the subject. You're right about that. Of course, sure. I wanted to save myself from a conviction and for a crime I did not commit in that way. It was clear. You are natural. I was in the room, the arrest warrant, and also the indictment, which was later admitted and then negotiated by the court, clearly said everyone knew that. And everyone went in there with the intention of killing the man. And for me, that was very clear, and for others too, I communicated that very openly in court. That was not the case. That's why I naturally said, I testify to make it clear, hey guys, it didn't go down like that. The information that is on the table here from the investigative authorities, which they have worked out, is not correct. The definition does not apply. The intention on my part and various others does not apply like this. I testified in this regard as saying nothing in court means there is nothing that can, must, or should be considered. And therefore, of course, this was a significant part of my intention.
Because there are many, when you deal with YouTube comments, even under your video, so you generally shouldn't deal with YouTube comments, but you still stumble upon them every now and then. And then, of course, there are always wannabe gangsters who say, hey, he should serve his time there, you know. He knowingly played the gangster role, but committing murder is different. People are quick to say he's serving a life sentence.
Exactly. Yes, it's always difficult with the comments. The internet has become a mental cesspool in part. It has many advantages and many societal disadvantages as well. Significant amounts of incitement, hate speech, calls for criminal acts, defamation, insults, and slander. It doesn't really affect me much, but yes, that's totally true, and everyone has the right to their own opinion. Everyone can think what they want as long as it's legal. Of course, if someone thinks they need to say, why doesn't he follow through, and it's intense and it's awesome and it's cool, I think he's never faced this situation and doesn't know what he's talking about. Therefore, I can't even take such a statement seriously, because at the end of the day, only someone who has really lived through such a situation and was personally affected and found themselves in such a situation as a victim and also as a threatened person can empathize. And therefore, it's always like this person, of course, has no idea what he's talking about. Therefore, it's an opinion based on superficialities and, I don't know, quickly written, not just that, but also a difficult mindset, I think, which one should fundamentally question for oneself. But hey, we live in Germany, everyone has the right to their free expression of opinion, as long as it is not actionable in a certain way. And if he thinks it's cool to do or pull through with something like that, in quotation marks, then he should be fine with it. I'm fine with my whole story and it doesn't bother me at all.
I'm going to ruin the mood between us a bit before we delve into your story.
Oh, not a problem at all.
You earn money from the death of a person and the suffering of their family?
No, definitely not. I mean, I'm not peddling in the sense of the boy was killed. At the end of the day, it is, of course, the story. It was very, very big in the media without my influence. I was locked up back then. Berlin was full for years. The tabloid press, the normal press, television media, internet. So I didn't make a big deal out of the topic, but the case itself made huge waves. You've said it yourself, it was one of, I believe, by far the most extreme cases in Berlin, unfortunately. Things keep happening there now, but to execute someone on camera, at the end of the day, that's what it was, and I didn't make a big deal out of the topic. What was important to me, apart from these big inquiries that I had afterwards following my dismissal by the media, because of course there is interest when we speak with a main protagonist, which is completely understandable, was of course that it was important to me to reveal my view of things. After so many experts, lawyers, journalists have given their 2 cents, which is completely legitimate, but at the end of the day they weren't there. It was simply important to me as a co-perpetrator and participant at the immediate crime scene, and also part of this structure and also a member of this structure as a Hells Angels member, to simply carry my view of things to the outside and do good to the public so they also have my view of things. But my motivation, my intention, and me as a person, not only through third parties, hearsay, and reporting, that is sometimes superficial. So that was initially the most important thing for me, because it's never foreseeable whether you'll make money with it. And of course, that's also a claim, do I even make money with it? At the end of the day. Yes, it's perfectly fine. And with the question, I have no problem with it at all. And therefore, that was the most important thing for me at first.
It's also a criticism that always comes my way. That's why I'm talking about it openly. You have a mission now. You're on the move. You also want to prevent young people or adolescents from following a similar path in life, but it's important to maybe talk about it openly. We're now going into your old life. Do you also separate both lives? Do you talk about an old life, an old mindset, and the new Kassra, or do you not differentiate?
Question. Of course, physically, I'm still the same person as I was back then. But of course, mentally, as you yourself already say, mindset, as they say, is of course beyond like day and night, black and white. So, of course, it is an old personality, but the old personality has, of course, also shaped me. I am today who I am, with all the deeds, all the sorrow, the suffering, the misery, the pain that I have inflicted on others, on myself, on my environment, has, of course, in the end brought me to the point where I am today who I am. This is, of course, a part of my story, and I don't want to hide it, and I don't define it as my old self, early self. I simply believe that I have upgraded myself, I have grown up, I have reflected on myself, my possibilities, I hope so. It's always difficult to judge oneself, but my feeling tells me that I have tackled some issues in the last few years that I couldn't have tackled before because I simply wasn't ready and didn't want to take responsibility for myself to work on these issues. And accordingly, I am of course very shaped by my old life, and that has led me to have my mindset as it is now. And I don't define it the way you say, but I know what you're getting at, and you could say that.
If someone doesn't know you now and stumbles across this video, what are the terms for your old life? I'm going to separate that a bit now. The Kassra 1.0, what are the terms for you? What terms come to mind? You've mentioned the angels now, excels, angels. What other words are there?
To define my old life?
Yes.
Asshole.
Period.
Yes, morally decayed, devoid of empathy, ruthless towards other people, his loved ones and other people, completely self-righteous, unreflective, and also immature at the end of the day, and irresponsible towards himself and his fellow human beings. That's how I would define my old life or my old self.
And what other terms would you add to that? So organized crime?
Yes, of course, organized crime. Sure. If you now look at the context, so the environment was, of course, organized crime, a 1% club, Hells Angels, structured violence, violence as the main means of execution to get its interest through subculture.
What were the fields of activity?
In what way? In which area?
So in organized crime?
Well, earning illegal money, conducting illegal business, mostly at the expense of others or at the expense of the state, untaxed, whatever. It varied depending on various factors. And yes.
With untaxed, my stomach tightens immediately. My community knows what was going on with me. I was pulled over, which is why I had to smile right away. Don't mess with the tax office. An absolute final boss. And yes, I've gotten to know you over the past few days. From my perspective, we have a great connection. I really enjoy listening to you. This is going to be a great broadcast today. Thorsten is also here behind the camera. We were together yesterday. You have a very lovely wife, child. We really got along very well.
The feeling is mutual?
Thank you very much. And it's always the question, I've met people, such an environment where it was said, okay, very simple. They went off. They just knew, okay, with violence, with a weapon, I can go off and somehow become criminal. But anyone who sits with you for a few minutes realizes, okay, there's something in the head, it works, there are connections, there is reflection. So I'm going to throw something out there. I would say without crime, you might be a very successful manager of a large company today, maybe with, I don't know, from 10 to 50, 100 employees. No idea. You could lead the people. Yes, what happened? Why necessarily crime?
Oh, we're even deeper than before. I think childhood development plays a crucial role there. You can have all the potential in the world, but if you can't tap into it on the playing fields where it can benefit you, it's of no use. Then you're left high and dry with the talent, and it doesn't get a chance to shine.
But do you think, do you see yourself saying, it's a shame that I put my potential into this organized crime, instead of maybe saying, okay, I'll start a company or I'll climb the corporate ladder?
Yes, of course. I had a phase where I thought to myself, man, shit, I'll just say it like it is. Why didn't you go that route? Why didn't you do this? But I quickly abandoned that thought. I learned that in custody from would have bicycle chain, or why? Why? Because at the end of the day, it leads to you falling into such a mental hole, and that can really break you, especially in custody. I quickly said goodbye to that. I took it as it was, but then I just processed things retrospectively for myself and quickly realized that I had been severely traumatized from childhood and was not able to, as a young growing boy, as I said, to call upon and use my potential, which you are now describing. Thank you very much for the flowers, by the way. because I just didn't, I didn't have any support from the outside, or I never had the opportunity to say, for example, to parents, come on, do this now, you're good. We support you there. We see there you also have strengths, boy. Or my father took me somewhere back and forth. Of course, there are many people who say, hey, I grew up alone. It has nothing to do with the parents. Yes, but it's also always a matter of character. And I've had my successful 5 minutes here and there and wasn't unsuccessful in the okay. So in this field of crime business, there I, of course, used my potential negatively. For me, it was positive at the time, but at the end of the day, it was, of course, negative. But yes, I was very much in my own way with my demons, which then dragged on from my childhood into this time, which I did not work through, of which I was not even so aware. Looking back, I also reached conclusions on many topics and worked through them for myself. But back then I was not capable. I was a young adult with a lot of responsibility on my shoulders, a new spouse, child, the journey. The intensity kept escalating. I began early and also detailed my entire career journey in my book. But as I said, I was my own biggest obstacle. And then, let's put it this way, you were interested in working with food. You were really into gastronomy. You wanted to run a business and throw yourself into it. Then you did that for a few months, but the things you carried with you simply led to you not being able to focus anymore, like someone who is at peace with themselves. And that then led to you causing, or others causing, such sideshow battlefields, be that as it may now, but which then led to completely throwing me off track again, which broke me or simply led me astray again. Therefore, there were simply the problems that I had with myself. Yes, I was simply standing in my own way.
You mentioned the family now. I personally also work a lot with young people, with adolescents, and I believe I'll just call it that. Sometimes on my channel, when an angry Walter shows up and then says, yes, okay, migrant, I can already imagine how he grew up. Prefabricated building, HOTS 4, then somehow out. But your story is also different. Yeah, you come from northern Germany. You are a northern German boy.
Yes, I am a Hamburg boy, more or less. I grew up in northern Germany. Norderstedt is 5 minutes from Hamburg Langhorn. It's essentially Hamburg. Anyone familiar with Norderstedt knows what I mean. For those unfamiliar, it's a small Hamburg suburb.
You don't have to see it.
You don't have to see it. But in terms of storage, it's a stone's throw away from Hamburg. That's why Hamburg, yes. And then I also moved to Hamburg later. I grew up in a working class family. I didn't grow up in a problem district. I had two parents who worked, who paid their bills. We weren't mega rich, but we weren't mega poor either. I had more than one pair of pants and two pairs of shoes, not 10, but also not just one for everything, but two, something like that. So I didn't grow up in a social hotspot, as one might imagine, as Wood Walter might imagine, or in a very precarious economic situation as far as the family is concerned. But other aspects played a role for me, which led to me developing in such a way years later in my childhood, youth, teen years, and then also as a young adult and in adulthood.
And where are your parents' roots?
Both parents are migrants. My mother is German-Chilean. She comes from Chile, South America. And my father is Iranian, and they both emigrated here more or less. But I was born, raised, and socialized here, yes.
Do you have siblings?
I have a sister, she's older, she's 4 years older than me, and yes.
How should we imagine this now? At home, okay, working class family, both parents working, then it starts off to school. How should we imagine this with the school? Was it easy for you? Did you fit in? What was the support like at home? What was maybe life at home like?
So academically, I was in the school system in northern Germany until secondary school. So in my time, as I grew up, it was like this: primary school, then there were the words for a school. Either it was then performance oriented. Everyone knows secondary modern school. Then it was secondary school, middle, and then also grammar school. I was always a high achiever in my primary school, was a quiet boy, was very eager to learn, was very clear also, so for a child, for the development, and was very interested, was a very eager to learn boy. And then I went to the secondary school, the first one to four. You always go from the first to the fourth grade in this primary school. From there, it proceeds to secondary school in the fifth year. And for me, it really started all these developmental problems that then became obvious. This is also a process that has already taken place before, but these problems only broke out and showed themselves from the secondary school onwards, towards the end of the fifth grade at the grammar school. Then I went to the grammar school.
At the age of 11, 12 years?
Yes, approximately that age, or possibly even a bit younger, I don't recall exactly. But from that point on, as they say, behavioral abnormalities and the first frictions with teachers, students started. Otherwise, I was always a favorite among students, a teacher's pet, a high achiever, sometimes even almost a nerd.
Was education important at home? Was it paid attention to?
Yes. My father and my parents are educated people and both speak perfect German and were very interested in my development, or rather, more my mother than my father. Of course, my father too, but my mother was a more formative person in my life in terms of development and the passing on of values.
Which values?
Well, being open to other people. I mean, you also have a story with your rights and all that. For example, we didn't have that at all. There was never any rejection of religions, skin colors, or other things. Every person is as they are, and we just didn't have any categorization of people. And I never had this, I am somehow a child of immigrants, and so for me, I was always me. I was born here. There was nothing to question, and that's how I grew up. As I said, my mother played a bigger role in my upbringing, always welcoming everyone with open arms, black, white, yellow, green, blue, male, female, whatever. Religion is irrelevant. Its presence or absence doesn't matter. There are no reservations from a human perspective. There is also such a thing. And therefore, I grew up and was raised very open-minded. And then I missed other things.
If you're already offering me the penalty kick. What things, when you look at your childhood or family life today, what things would you have wished for, or what was missing?
Now, specifically for childhood, it was a decent father role. My father was not that. I'm convinced of that today. Of course, it's not easy for sure if he hears it like that too. But that's just how it was. You have to call things by their name. My father simply did not live up to his role towards me as a son. There was also my sister. He wasn't present as a father at all. He was physically present, did his things, went to work, and then he was there sporadically and when he felt like it, but he never engaged with me as a person. He never consciously participated in my development. He never encouraged me in the sense of, come on, let's do something. What are you into? Where can I help you? Where can I support you? You're my boy, become a man. Passed on these male values like responsibility, self-confidence, discipline, taking responsibility for his environment, for the family, in terms of cohesion and such. He didn't provide any of that. As a father, he just didn't exist for me. As a son, if I replay it all, or I have replayed it, he just didn't exist. He was there, had his 5 minutes that were a bit brighter, but nowhere near what I am now, a father of two, defined as a father, and where I say, okay, he is fulfilling his role as a father. It's never easy to be a parent, but I think there are some basic things you just have to have and you have to show in order to be fair to the child, because in the end it's a human being. It depends on having the parent, that you give them something on their way, and that just didn't happen with me.
This is not just a format where we want to tell a cool story, but the channel should provide added value. And it's also very important for people to understand this is now also in science. It is when it comes to radicalization or crime, a missing father figure or a disturbed relationship with the father often plays a role. So it's always exciting to hear. It's very important for many people that a father figure is there. So those of you who are fathers, engage with your children.
Yes, definitely.
Try to be a beacon or a rock, imparting values. But you already said like fifth, sixth grade. That's when certain behavioral problems began. How should we imagine this? What kind of behavioral problems were they? Are we talking about violence? Are we talking about rejection of school, parents, or what kind of abnormalities have occurred?
Well, I then got out of this chick school. I'll just call it that now. From this elementary school, you're already very much in such a cocoon. The environment remains child-friendly and well-cushioned. Students typically have the same teachers for about 4 years. That's how it was back in the school where I was. And accordingly, you had a completely different relationship and everything was much more personal. 4 years of working with a child, I think, also bonds. There are also negative experiences. For me, it was just positive. And then, of course, you go to a school. It's always the same classmates, 4 years. And then, of course, you come into a situation for the first time that you don't know. You have a new environment, completely new students. You face new teachers and a new situation. Everything is much more impersonal. And from the beginning, I had difficulties finding my way around. That took half a year. And the first conflicts I had were with the teachers, because for the first time, the teachers didn't have the kind of interaction I was used to. And that was new to me. They were very lacking in empathy at times and also very social and pedagogically valuable. I would say, again, the topics they worked on with me, which led to me being extremely confused as a child. I was just still a child.
Studying social sciences doesn't necessarily make a person social.
Exactly. You can't learn how to deal with people. Either you can do it or you can't. That's when I first experienced racism like never before. As I said, we mentioned it at the beginning. I told you that I grew up there too, that I was always me. There was no definition like we are not Germans or this and that. We also spoke German at home. I also speak Farsi, but we also spoke German. My father also speaks perfect German. So there was no yes. You know, for me it was, I was born here, grew up here. For me, that's all. I am one of you and nothing else. And then I experienced racism for the first time in class. That really confused me. I couldn't deal with it. And of course, these are things that can hurt a young guy. Yeah, when you are insulted in your identity like that. Kids can be very mean to one another.
Definitely.
And that was, as I remember today, very irritating for me. And I had no one to share this with. That then builds up. You have no one, and therefore, as we've already said, I really had no one who would share this with me. My mother did many things right and many things wrong because she couldn't do them. My father was simply not present, and I had no one who was a person of trust for me in the sense of...
You were left a bit alone with that.
Yes, of course, sure, and completely overwhelmed too. And it's just a matter of time before it develops instigatively with the development. At school, no teacher took you aside to ask how you were doing. You were just one of 30 students. And it's more like one who doesn't function is rather sorted out. So he doesn't take the other 29 with him, which is also very unfortunate. I understand on the one hand, on the other hand, it is of course also tragic, and because they are of course all human beings. But those were the first negative aspects that then irritated me to the max. And that's how it continued. A negative profession. There was a particular incident. I can't specifically say what happened, but from then on there were several experiences and my academic performance suffered as a result. And then it was the first time for me I was getting 5s, 4s. I wasn't used to this.
It does something to you.
Yes, of course. Like for me as a child, there were so many negative things that were bombarding you, things you didn't even know about.
And I know it's a very superficial question, but did you have more of a bio-German, as it's sometimes called, a bio-German circle of friends? Or did you turn to and say, well, then I'll just surround myself with other migrant children if I'm not really accepted or excluded here, or the topic of racism?
That came later, definitely, right, Matt? But that development came only later. Now, I'm at a stage I haven't defined anything and didn't know anything else. I had very, very many bio-German friends. A Thorsten, a Sven, I still remember them today. Very long childhood friends, so a certain phase, but already been long-term back then. Thus, it didn't exist initially. I had my first non-bio-German friend that was in high school. He was a South Korean. I was very good with him. And there were also the first other migrant children, but we didn't differentiate among each other. We never communicated that in any way. I only found out about it later. He then told me that they come from South Korea and so on, but we never defined it or anything like that.
Only when we got older.
Yes, exactly. And therefore it was then, yeah, but this step, the one you're talking about, it came a bit later, but it did come.
But the journey at the high school came to an end?
Yes, it was a short trip. I left after 1.5 years, just before the 6th grade, because it simply wasn't working out at all.
Does that mean another school change?
Another school change after a short time, 1.5 years is not really long, and school change due to negative issues, negative development, and of course it was okay. And I noticed it's not working so well anymore. There is badness everywhere. No one interacts, deals, or supports me in any meaningful way.
Were the parents disappointed because of the high school?
Of course, sure. Especially my father was then also disappointed. Why doesn't he work? What's going on? My sister was at the same school as me and was a high achiever.
It also does something among siblings?
Of course, sure. And my father always had a much, much better and closer relationship with my sister, which I'm happy for her, but I, as a boy, completely fell by the wayside or fell down, and of course had no one who talks to you about it, you know. Normally I do this today with my girls. If anything is up, I talk to them or rather try to communicate with them, and you notice, you know, when a child comes home, they've had a shitty day or a person, you notice that. Yes, and then you go and say, do we want to talk about it? What happened? Can I help you? And then in the best case, they talk, she or he talks to you about it. And then, of course, as a parent, you are first there to build up the child and stabilize it and try to work through the topic or the problem it carries with it in a positive sense. And I didn't have that, and then I bottled it up. As I said, I then went to the secondary school for my middle school diploma.
I'm sorry for interrupting. We can always do that. For the people, because we have so many who deal with it. People, please don't make love dependent on school grades.
Yes, that's really bad. Giving love based on inability or ability is a very insidious way of giving love. In my opinion, it is not love, but it is simply manipulative and highly insidious towards the person, and very unjust and also very unfair. Totally well said.
Then you are at the secondary school. Did you settle in well there? What age are we talking about now? 13? Maybe a year and a half of high school?
If at all, yes. If at all, I think around 12, 13, maybe even 11, I don't know, approximately.
Were you, even though you were going to a new school, but were you in a sports club? Were you a popular kid, or were you an outsider? Were you a loner, or were you already looking for a group, even as a teenager?
Well, in elementary school, I was also at the very front, recognized high achiever, and I also had a good circle of friends with the schools. That changed then, and that's usually the case in school. If you're such a problem child, most children don't want to have anything to do with you, because then, yes, you have difficulties with the parents, with the teachers, you have to leave the class, you are sent out because you have disturbed the lesson or are somehow in conflict with the teacher and such things. And the children notice that, of course, and nobody wants to be dragged into such negative vibes. Even children notice that and sort it out very quickly. And then I also had conflicts among each other. As I mentioned, it also stems from within. You develop negatively, carry negative energy, react very negatively to certain things, and have changed in nature. Negativity always attracts negativity, just as the other way around. As a result, I only had topics, even eventually in the class. I then left and attended the secondary school for half a year. So it was a really bad guest performance, so it was even worse than before. I entered an ongoing class, so it was different from what I expected.
Also very difficult.
Totally difficult. I came into an ongoing system. Even in high school, I entered a new class where we were all new students. But there it is, like you come into a 1.5-year-old existing class with 1.5 years of existence. Everyone knows each other. No one was completely new. Just the problem child, more or less. From their perspective, I don't work at all, which was even worse than the definition I dislike. I then stopped listening altogether, did nothing at all. Then I dealt with one or two guys, I don't even remember their names, who were about like me. And then nothing happened at all. Arrived too late, wasn't there, skipped and all that stuff. And then after half a year, nothing worked anymore. And then I left there and went to the neighboring school, which was opposite. I went to the main school.
Also many changes then.
Yes, very bad. And of course, that also did something to the child. So it naturally does something to the child. So to me then. And then I went to the main school, and then it was like this. I didn't get better academically there, but it got better for me socially there. Because that's where I first, as you just said, came across people who looked like me, and everyone knows the main school has a different clientele than the secondary school and a high school. That's just how it is, without offending anyone. I've had that experience too, so I can say that's the way it is. And then it was just like that. I had boys for the first time who were like me. They understood me, they looked like me, and accepted me just as I was. Even despite all these problems. That didn't change in middle school, it just got worse. It's not like it was just a phase, but it really became a routine for me. But I wasn't singled out there. There were several of them, and they didn't find it problematic at all. We then united and formed a clique, consisting mostly of Russian, Turkish boys with me, with my Iranian, Chilean background.
Perhaps as a final question, when you all came together as a clique, was it like we all don't fit in here?
Exactly.
And did you feel like, I don't fit in here, the system is crap, high school, secondary school, now primary school, and screw them? Or how should we imagine your attitude at that time?
I didn't define it that way at the time, but in retrospect, that was the intention. Birds of a feather flock together. And we all had our burdens to bear, and all the problem children, in quotes, then teamed up, and that's how the development was.
Kassra, first of all, thank you very much for your openness to talk about family. You said it, you also know that your father might be watching this, your mom, sister, and so on. It's not always that easy. So folks, give out a few props. As I said, also check out Kassra's book, The Persian, a Spiegel bestseller. I've read the book twice now. Very entertaining, very good. I read it twice in 4 hours on vacation with many dog ears and questions marked inside. There's a dog ear on every other page. So first of all, thank you very much for your openness. We're going to go into the second part soon, and then probably a bit of gang life and clique will start. But you'll tell us about that in a moment. So first of all, thank you very much for your time, for being here. Thorsten, thank you for your help. And then folks, I'll see you in the second part.